Hi, so this is to follow on from the previous video on the Sudetenland and the Munich Agreement and Conference. So just to start with a quick recap, a quote from Winston Churchill speaking in Parliament when debating what was going to happen in Munich on the 5th of October in 1938. I'll begin by saying the most unpopular and most unwelcome thing, namely that we have sustained a total and unmitigated defeat. I think that in the future the Czechoslovak state cannot remain independent. You will find that in a period of time which may be measured by years, but may be measured by only months, Czechoslovakia will be taken over by the Nazi regime. So Churchill, who was an outspoken politician at that time, seen as a bit of a warmonger and a main critic towards the policy of appeasement and Chamberlain, was predicting that next you were going to see the downfall of Czechoslovakia because of the loss of the Sudetenland. So that's where we're going to focus this video in on Czechoslovakia. Basically, just to quickly recap, the Czechs, by losing the Sudetenland, had lost those mountains, they'd lost the pillboxes, they'd lost the minefields, they'd lost the barbed wire, they'd lost 34 divisions of their army, they'd lost Skoda armaments works that now would come under Nazi German control, and they'd lost their heavy industry as well. So there was a lot of coal and lignite, which is brown coal, were produced in the Sudetenland. A knock-on effect as well was the Sudeten Germans were seen as getting their way. So the campaigns, the protests and such, which started in the Sudetenland, were obviously Sudeten Germans doing it, and this is the people who were delighted to see the Nazi occupation and takeover of the Sudetenland. Well, this then just encouraged other national groups within Czechoslovakia to return to their homes. So you saw Poland getting part of Czechoslovakia, you saw Hungary would get part of Czechoslovakia, and by 1939 you would see that obviously Czechoslovakia is Czechs and Slovaks. The Slovak people were demanding more rights as well, so there was a divide happening. It was crumbling in Czechoslovakia. So the Czech president at this time is now Emil Haga, and he's got no choice but to go to Adolf Hitler. So he has to ask Hitler for help, basically. The story goes that when Haga went to meet Hitler, this old man, because that's what he was an old man, was kept waiting until the very, very early hours of the morning, whilst Hitler, who was notoriously like a film buff, sat and did his usual routine of watching a couple of late night films, whilst outside of Hitler's own little personal cinema, Haga's sitting there fretting what's going to happen to the country that he's in charge of. And depending what you believe, there has been medical reports, according to some historians, that Haga suffered some minor heart attacks whilst waiting for Hitler to make his presence known. And in the end, it's made very clear to Haga that you've got no choice but to invite the Nazis in. So again, this is not seen as an invasion. He hasn't gone in and forced them, it's seen as an invitation. So Hitler would enter Prague, and that would be on the 15th of March 1939. Now this is very, very different. If you see the footage of it, when he went into Vienna in Austria, when he went into the Sudetenland, it was crowds cheering. There was silence in Prague. These people didn't want the Nazis. They were not German-speaking people, and there has been talk since in interviews of German soldiers not with their home video cameras, video footage recording them, and waving flags and such, but actually threatening the Czech people, swearing at the Czech people, etc. So this was hostile. Okay, Czechoslovakia was finished because it hadn't been an invasion and it was an invitation. Britain and France did nothing, but what it does do is it almost puts the light bulb under the head, or over the head, sorry, of Chamberlain, to say this is the end of appeasement. And he totally changes his attitudes towards Hitler now, because Hitler kind of turned around and say, oh well, these people are German speaking, because they weren't. He can't say this is a place Germany had a right to because of the Treaty of Versailles, because it wasn't originally German. So those arguments are out the window. And he also personally upset Chamberlain. Chamberlain, as I've previously mentioned, was all about personal diplomacy, and Hitler had broken this promise. the promise is gone, and Chamberlain felt aggrieved by this. So Hitler's now being viewed as an aggressor. His aims are not limited, and basically Mein Kampf would have to be taken very seriously. And Chamberlain could see that basically Hitler was just going to keep taking more and more territory until he was stopped. Alright, so there is a bit of a problem here. Okay, now Britain actually starts bringing in conscription and building up our army at this point. So we've actually see the reaction is now maybe we are going to have a war. This was the first time conscription was brought in peacetime in Britain. Remember, it came in 1916 during World War I, the middle of the war. And Hitler from here is very clear. He becomes quite aggressive, and it's not something that's written about much in the textbooks, but he does go on and he takes Memel, which was an area that was lost as part of the Treaty of Versailles, and this is an area that was basically inhabited by Germans, and Lithuania loses this, and Britain knows that Poland's next. You can see, like, Hitler makes no secrets at all that he's going to look for Danzig. Poland had what was known as this Polish corridor, and basically this strip of land cut East Prussia off from the rest of Germany. Danzig was German speaking, and Hitler makes no secret at all basically that he's going to do this, that he's going to go after, you know, he didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see that Poland was going to be, you know, like, on the list. So Britain and France in April 1939 promised to help Poland if it was ever attacked by Germany. At the same point in time, you've got Mussolini takes over Albania. So Mussolini's been aggressive. This is obviously Hitler's ally, and Hitler, we know he withdrew, we know he signed the non-aggression pact in 1934 with Poland. He withdraws that now. So Poland is clearly a target. And he also cancelled the Anglo-German naval agreement of 1935. So Britain's an opponent now, but not one he's really taking seriously. So he just cancels this Anglo-German naval agreement. Germany is going to be aggressive. Okay, now this is going to lead into the next video, but basically the people who were best placed to help Poland out weren't Britain, weren't France, but it was Stalin and Russia, the USSR, Soviet Union. Okay, so we're going to look at that in the next video.